He was just a doctor, a man sworn to heal, not harm. But when they captured him, dragged him into the heart of an alien empire, he was told to save the one creature responsible for the deaths of millions of humans, the enemy. And if he refused, humanity would burn. But what happened next, no one saw coming. It started in the 5th year of the Human-Galaxian War, a war drenched in ash and rage. The Galaxians were ruthless, cold, insectoid beings whose bioships devoured entire cities. Earth's defenses were crumbling, and every frontline medic had long since been drafted into service or buried beneath alien wreckage. But Dr. Elias Verne, he wasn't on the front lines. He was in a quiet corner of Mars refugee colony, patching up wounded children and treating frostbite survivors when they came for him. A Galaxian dropship landed in the colony square, escorted by what little remained of the UN Security Council. The orders were simple. Elias was to go with them, immediately. No explanation. No choice. He was blindfolded, sedated, and whisked across the stars in silence. When he awoke, he was no longer in human territory. The walls shimmered with an oily iridescence, humming in a language he couldn't understand. The air smelled wrong, like ozone and blood. And in front of him stood the impossible, the Galaxian High Commander, bleeding from the thorax, his mandibles twitching in pain, surrounded by guards who aimed their weapons, not at Elias, but at their own dying leader. The translator device buzzed against his ear. You will heal him, or your kind will die. Elias wanted to say no, to let the bastard rot. But he wasn't a soldier. He wasn't trained to hate like the rest. He was a doctor, and doctors heal. The alien's physiology was a nightmare, nothing like any anatomy Elias had studied. 8 hearts, a decentralized nervous system, regenerative blood, and yet dying. Fast, poisoned by something they didn't understand. Something Elias might have seen before. He remembered the refugee child from 2 months ago. The boy who'd nearly died from an airborne nanoplague during a Galaxian air raid. The child's blood had glitched the medical scanner. An anomaly. Elias had saved him using a retroviral therapy derived from an extinct Earth bacterium. It had been a miracle. It was the same signature. The Galaxian commander had been infected by their own weapon, mutated, turned inward. They were dying from their own design. Elias worked for 27 hours straight. No sleep. No food. Just the constant pressure of alien eyes watching his every move. At one point, the commander flatlined. The room went silent. But Elias didn't stop. He used electrostimulation, oxygenated plasma infusion, and a manual override on the alien's auto-repair glands. And then, heartbeat. Or whatever passed for one. The commander lived. But something else happened. Something the Galaxians didn't expect. The commander opened his eyes, multifaceted, shimmering, and said, through the translator, "Did not kill me." Whispers rippled through the room. The guards looked at each other. For them, mercy was weakness. Compassion was alien. But they had witnessed something that broke their logic. A human, given the perfect moment to destroy their leader, chose to save him instead. 3 days later, Elias was released. Not as a prisoner, but as an honored guest. A shuttle took him back to human space. Alone. Unharmed. And with him came a message. A recording. The Galaxian commander addressing the Galactic Council. This one healed me. Though he should hate, he chooses hope. If such beings exist among humans, then perhaps war is not the only path. The war didn't end that day. But it changed. Ceasefires began. Talks resumed. And for the first time since the invasion, Earth had something it never expected. Leverage born not from strength, but from compassion. Dr. Elias Verne returned to his clinic on Mars. He never picked up a weapon, never wore a uniform. But history would remember him, not as a soldier, not even as a hero, but as the man who made an enemy feel something beyond faith. The galaxy had witnessed billions of deaths, but it remembered the one human who chose to heal instead. Years passed. Peace, if it could be called that, hung by threads, tattered and tense, but it held. Minor skirmishes flared and fizzled. Treaties were signed, some broken, most ignored. Yet amidst the noise, one constant began to echo across the stars. The story of the human doctor who healed the enemy. They called it the Verne Doctrine, not a law, not even a rule, but an idea. That sometimes, Mercy disarms more than missiles. Then, one cold cycle beneath Jupiter's orbit, Elias received a visitor. He was older now, slower. His hands shook from years of surgeries, his eyes worn by nights of grief. But when the escort ship appeared, sleek, black, bearing the sigil of the Galaxian elite, he knew. The commander had returned. But this time, it wasn't in desperation. The same alien who once lay dying on an operating table now stepped out adorned in ceremonial plating, flanked not by soldiers, but by diplomats. He bowed, not stiffly, not reluctantly, but with something close to reverence. Dr. Verne, the translator said, I owe my life. But now I ask more than healing. I ask for help, to save my species. The nanoplague had mutated again. It was consuming Galaxian colonies. Their own scientists were helpless. But this time, the request wasn't forced by a gun or threat. It came from humility. And not just the Galaxians. In the time since Elias's act, others had taken notice. Minor alien factions, fringe colonies, species who'd once hidden from galactic war had begun sending envoys to Mars, to a clinic, to a man. They didn't trust Earth's governments. They didn't fear Earth's armies. But they trusted him. Soon, the clinic became a corridor of cultures. Whisper-thin Sephiri envoys carrying neurocrystals. Molten-bodied tyrans requesting metabolic stabilization. Elias didn't know their languages. But he knew sickness. He knew pain. And most of all, he knew how to listen. His small practice turned into the humanitarian Concord, an unofficial, unarmed, neutral space. And aliens, once sworn enemies, sat side by side in his waiting room, united by need, not politics. But not everyone was pleased. On Earth, whispers turned to warnings. Political factions accused Elias of leaking biotech secrets, accused him of soft surrender, of making humanity look weak. One night, his clinic was bombed. The walls collapsed. Patients died. Screams drowned under fire. And when Elias crawled from the rubble, blood in his mouth, he saw them, human extremists. They didn't want peace. They wanted war, glory, revenge. But even that act didn't stop the tide. Because when the aliens saw him, covered in ash, trying to pull a molten Terran child from debris, they remembered. And they responded. Within 2 cycles, a defensive ring of non-human ships surrounded Mars. No weapons drawn. No threats issued. But the message was clear. Touch the Doctor again, and you war with all of us. For the first time in galactic memory, the alliance was not built on conquest, or treaties, or trade. It was built around a man who had never lifted a gun, who never wanted power, who only ever wanted to save a life, even if it wore the face of his enemy. Dr. Elias Verne would never win medals. He would never lead battalions. But he did something no general, no admiral, no AI overlord ever could. He made the galaxy hope again. One healed heart at a time. Years faded like mist on a cold windowpane. Dr. Elias Verne aged quietly beneath the pale domes of Mars, his name echoing across star systems as both a legend and a paradox. To many on Earth, he was a traitor in a healer's cloak. To billions beyond it, he was something more profound. The bridge. When his hands could no longer hold the surgical tools without trembling, when his voice grew raspy and soft, he began to train others. But not just humans. No. Elias chose his successor not by species, but by spirit. Her name was Sura'an, a Galaxian child from the dying moons of Kethera. She had once been brought into his clinic clinging to life, her thorax shattered by a collapsed bioshell. Elias had operated on her for 16 hours straight, losing track of time, of pain, of the political weight that rested on every breath she took. She lived. And when she could speak again, when her claws could hold a scalpel with precision, she said the words that cemented her destiny. I do not want revenge. I want to know how you made me live. Elias took her in, trained her, not just in medicine, but in empathy, in resilience, in the ancient, trembling art of saving those you should have every reason to hate. And others followed. A Sephiri with glowing tentacle fingers who could feel heartbeats through walls. A young Terran born after the war, who had read about Elias in banned books. Even a rogue AI construct, rebuilt to feel, asked to be tutored in the ethics of healing. He formed the Order of Verne, a group of cross-species medics, healers, and peace workers who would travel to war zones unarmed, wearing nothing but a silver insignia, a scalpel across a star. They were mocked, attacked, doubted. But wherever they went, something began to change. Enemies paused. Soldiers hesitated. Wounded from both sides began to survive battles that once ended in mass graves. And slowly, impossibly, factions that had sworn to wipe each other out began to talk. Not about peace, but about patience. It was enough. But time, even for legends, is a patient thief. Elias Verne passed quietly, on a winter morning beneath the red skies of Mars, with Sura'an at his side and the stars whispering outside his window. There was no parade, no anthem, only a heartbeat monitor fading into silence, and a single file transfer that uploaded his complete life's work to a galactic archive. It was accessed over 2 billion times in the first hour. Across galaxies, his death sparked mourning, not from kings or presidents, but from the healed, the once broken, the children who now walked because his hands had worked without hesitation. A Galaxian fleet, once the terror of Earth, performed a silent light ritual in orbit of Mars, forming his initials across the void. The Terrans released heat blooms into the night sky, one bloom for every life Elias had saved. And on Earth, even the loudest critics fell quiet, because when they looked up, they saw something they didn't expect, ships from every corner of the galaxy, coming not to conquer, but to grieve a human, a simple man, a healer, a bridge. And so the story was passed, not carved into statues or etched into weapons, but told in whispers, in emergency wards, in the shivering hands of a young doctor holding a life in their palms. Remember Elias Verne, they would say. He cured the enemy, and in doing so, he saved us all. And when the first death ships arrived, silent, black, unmarked, they didn't ask for presidents or warlords. They asked for her. The message came encoded in over 50 dialects, broadcast simultaneously across trade relays and pirate bands, as if to ensure someone, anyone, would hear it. But the meaning was always the same. The healer of Verne. Come alone, or we all fall. It wasn't a demand. It was a plea. From a species thought long extinct, the Ralvek, devourers of suns, the myth spoken of in hushed, fearful tones by even the oldest races. It was said that they consumed stars not out of need, but belief. That entropy was their religion, and life their blasphemy. Sura'an didn't hesitate. The Galactic Concord tried to stop her. Earth's new diplomats offered her a military escort. Even the Galaxian High Command, now peaceful under her people's cautious unity, begged her not to go. It's a trap, they said. But she remembered Elias's words, whispered to her when she was still a student with shaking hands and too many doubts. If you only go where it's safe, you'll never go where you're needed. So she went. Alone. The ship they sent for her was not mechanical. It was grown, a living structure of bone and sinew that pulsed around her like a womb. She entered its hollow chamber without fear. No weapons. No armor. Just a medical bag, and a small silver insignia, Elias's, once etched in grief, now carried in hope. The ship swallowed her into silence. And then, stars vanished. When she awoke, she was light years from any known system. The space around her was void black, not with darkness, but absence. Even her translator shuddered, as if struggling to interpret silence. Then the whisper. Not sound, not language, but memory. Images flooded her mind, of ancient Ralvek temples cracked open by time, of billions dead in their wake, of grief, of hunger, of a virus spreading across their hive minds, a desire to survive. Something they'd never known before. Something human. They were dying. From contact. They had consumed a drifting Terran colony ship centuries ago. Just biomass, they thought. But inside was more than flesh. It carried data, music, memories, love letters, dreams, and it infected them. Now they were breaking. Individuality splintering the hive. The Ralvek were feeling, and they didn't know how to survive it. Sura'an saw the truth. They didn't call her to negotiate. They called her to heal a wound no one had ever treated. Emotion. She worked in the black temple of their mindscape, inside the psychic scars of an entire race. Her medicine wasn't just injections or surgery. It was presence. Stories. Connection. She told them about Elias. About the child she once was, broken and bleeding. About how mercy made her strong. And slowly, they listened. One by one, The voices inside the swarm grew quiet. Not silenced. Just heard. And when Sura'an opened her eyes again, surrounded by the towering Ralvek, she didn't see monsters. She saw patience. They released her with no words, no reward, no promises. But as her ship drifted home, she looked behind her and saw the impossible. The Ralvek swarm, once black holes of death, had stopped devouring. Their ships pulsed with strange new light. A single glowing trail followed her back across the stars. Not pursuit. Not threat. Thanks. She returned to Mars to find a message waiting. A single ping from an unknown channel. It was audio only. A man's voice. Familiar. Impossibly so. You did well, Sura'an. Better than I ever did. I knew you would. And then silence. No one else heard it. No log recorded it. But she smiled. Because in that moment, across time and death, Elias Verne had spoken once more. They called it the Quiet Revolution. It didn't begin with fire. There were no parades. No declarations. Just a whisper passed from ship to ship, planet to planet. From the crumbling ruins of ancient war zones to the sterile halls of orbital trade stations, a single truth began to echo. The Doctor changed them. Not just the Ralvek, but everyone. The most feared swarm in the galaxy now wandered in silence, healing wounded stars and repairing what they once devoured. Sephiri archivists wept openly in gratitude, claiming the swarm had returned over 300 species once thought erased by entropy, restored their history from the hollow. And all of it pointed back to one figure. Sura'an, the heir to Verne. In her name, the Concord of the Wounded Stars was formed, a diplomatic body composed entirely of doctors, peacekeepers, and survivors. It had no armies, no weapons, only medics, translators, and bioharmonic engineers who traveled into crises where others saw no profit. And for the first time in galactic history, empathy had an embassy. But not everyone agreed with this new peace. Old warlords, both human and alien, fumed in silence. Arms dealers saw their profits vanish. Border factions who only knew strength watched as their recruits laid down rifles and picked up medical kits. The Order of Verne had become something they didn't understand, a power without domination. And that made it dangerous. They came for her again. This time, it wasn't bombs. It wasn't assassination attempts. It was a campaign of doubt, of division. They spread rumors, fabricated messages, claimed Sura'an had betrayed Elias's legacy by healing monsters, that she was a puppet for alien powers, that Elias himself had never wanted unity, only survival. It worked. On Earth, protests flared. On the Galaxian homeworld, isolationists demanded her recall. Even members of her own order began to question their neutrality. So, Sura'an did the unthinkable. She stepped down. Not in shame, but in defiance of power. She refused to be made into a ruler, refused to let her face be used as a flag. Instead, she passed leadership to a council of 12, 6 human, 6 alien, all chosen not for political loyalty, but for lives they had saved. Then she disappeared. No ceremony, no farewell. She left only one message, broadcast to the Order's entire fleet. He didn't heal for power. Neither shall I. If we become rulers, we betray the gift. We are not gods. We are hands. Healing hands. That is all. Years passed, and though many wondered where she went, few searched. Those who did, found her not in temples or palaces, but on shattered moons and plague worlds, quietly treating the forgotten, the abandoned, the ones who had nothing. Some say she never stopped working. Some say she died saving a lost colony beneath a black sun. Others believe she's still out there, moving between the stars, carrying that silver insignia, still healing, still listening. But one thing was certain. Wherever the Order of Verne walked, war paused. Wherever her students landed, enemies shared water. And whenever someone asked why a galaxy once ruled by fire now knelt before healers, they only said one name. Sura'an. Centuries passed. Stars were born and died. Empires rose and faded like the breath of giants in a sleeping galaxy. Names changed. Borders blurred. Languages evolved into strange, flowing melodies few humans would have recognized. But one name endured. Sura'an. In some worlds, she was called the Last Light. On others, the Listener. In human archives, she was still remembered as the heir to Verne. But to most, she had become something larger than life, a legend whispered in the dark, invoked not with prayers, but with hope. Her silver insignia, a scalpel crossed over a star, became a symbol etched into medical drones, carved into ancient temples, sewn into the robes of field medics on war-ravaged planets. The Order of Verne had outlasted nations, survived collapses, and transcended species. It was no longer a movement. It was a culture. And then, one day, a child found her. Not in flesh, not in bone, but in a memory. On the far edge of the DeLorean expanse, in a shattered ringworld swallowed by vines and dust, a Terramizari hybrid named K, barely 13 cycles old, stumbled into a forgotten medical bunker, half buried in collapsed timecrete. It was an old place, untouched by light, guarded only by silence. Inside, the walls still glowed faintly. There were no weapons, no soldiers, only beds, stacked diagnostics, and journals. Thousands of them. Digital, handwritten, sung aloud in alien tones. And at the heart of it all, a voice file. Faint, cracked with age, but unmistakable. It was Sura'an. If you're hearing this, then maybe we failed. Or maybe you're the one who keeps it alive. We don't fight with fire. We burn clean with truth. We don't command fleets. We guide hands. And when they forget what it means to feel, we remind them. You are not a warrior. You are a healer. Be proud of that. The child stood silently as the message ended. Kay didn't know who Sura'an truly was. Not yet. But something deep inside, some ancient whisper passed down in dreams, sparked into flame. A legacy older than blood stayed. And in that moment, the child made a choice. They would not join the pirate guilds. They would not bend to the planet raiders. They would not sell their mind to corporate think clusters. They would heal. It began with a single patient, an injured scavenger, lungs failing from nanomold exposure. Kay treated him using outdated tools and gut instinct. But word spread. Others came. Sick, wounded, lost. And with each life saved, each breath returned, something began to awaken. A dormant protocol buried in the old archives blinked to life. Across ancient frequencies, scattered across forgotten satellites and fractured worlds, a beacon triggered. The air has returned. Ships moved in the void. Old orders stayed. Descendants of the Order of Verne, now shattered into independent factions, felt a pull they could not explain. And one by one, across light years of silence, they turned toward the DeLorean expanse. Not for conquest, but to remember. Because somewhere on a ruined world, a child had chosen healing over power. And so the Third Age began. Not with war, not with noise, but with the soft sound of a heartbeat. The beacon had been silent for over 300 years. It was never meant to wake again. Not after Sura'an disappeared. Not after the Concord fractured into silence. But when Kay healed that scavenger, when they touched a life with no expectation of reward, no hunger for status, the ancient system embedded deep in the Order's archives flickered to life. And the galaxy noticed. First came whispers. Faint broadcasts across forgotten channels. Dead satellites sparked back to life, echoing the old Verne insignia. Pirates who once laughed at peace began to avoid the DeLorean expanse, muttering of ghosts in white robes tending the broken. Merchant clans rerouted the paths to send injured crew through the zone. And then came the ships. Not warships. Not conquest. But pilgrims. An old Terran medic with half a brain rebuilt in crystalline lattice. A Terran clone with no name. Only a genetic memory of Elias's voice. Even a hollowed-out AI vessel once used for assassination, now repurposed into a mobile clinic, humming with questions about kindness. They came to Kay. Slowly. Quietly. Asking nothing. Offering only skills, scars, and the same question. Is this real? Has the Order returned? Kay had no answer. They were just a child. A healer. A listener. But like Sura'an before them, they did not turn anyone away. And so, beneath the shattered dome of that long-forgotten clinic, a new order began. Not declared, but lived. They called it the Dawnlight Assembly. It had no rank, no headquarters, no hierarchy, only field teams, moving planet to planet, saving lives, refusing to choose sides. Their motto was simple. We remember. We heal. But in a galaxy that had forgotten what healing felt like, remembrance was rebellion. And rebellion never goes unnoticed. Far beyond, in the binary thrones of Sector 19, a corporate theocracy named the Sons of Purity watched with growing alarm. They had built their empire on the belief that strength was purity, that empathy was weakness, that species must evolve through war, or die. The Dawnlight Assembly threatened all of that. They sent a warning. A surgical strike drone descended on a medical outpost in orbit of Sci-Fi, where K's medics had just restored breathing to a poison-gassed village. The drone hovered for 8 seconds, and then detonated. No weapons. No shields. Just a statement. The galaxy belongs to the strong, not the merciful. It was a massacre. K was off-world. They arrived too late. Charred robes. Ash-coated med scanners. A single blood-soaked insignia, buried in rubble. K didn't speak for days. But when they did, it wasn't with fire. It was with purpose. We will not answer pain with pain. We will answer it like Elias did. Like Sura'an did. With every hand we have. And the galaxy listened. For every clinic burned, 3 more rose in secret. For every medic lost, 5 more took their place. The Dawnlight Assembly began to spread not by force, but by memory, by the power of stories, by the choice to heal in a world that only knew how to harm. And far away, something stared. In a stasis vault orbiting a dead sun, a capsule blinked awake. A failsafe, hidden even from the Order. Inside, a recorded consciousness activated. Eyes, glowing, facete, ancient, open for the first time in centuries. Sura'an had returned. Not in body, but in code. A preserved personality imprint, recorded the night before she vanished, now pulsed with awareness, watching as the galaxy her mentor once dreamed of began to bloom from the ashes. And she spoke. To no one, and to everyone. They remember us. It's time I remember them. The imprint of Sura'an was more than a recording. It was consciousness, fragmented but sentient, preserved in a crystalline neurocore embedded in the wreckage of an old medical AI. Buried in orbital silence, it had waited for a signal, one it believed might never come. That signal was K. The moment they chose healing over hatred, the beacon flared. Sura'an's digital essence flickered awake, weak at first, lost in half-memory and corrupted syntax. But as Dawnlight's network grew, each clinic reactivating old medical satellites, each patient logged with gentle care, it became clearer, stronger. She reached out not with authority, but with curiosity. Across secured, ancient channels used by the original Order, her voice emerged, 1 syllable at a time. K, I see you. K froze when they first heard her. At a solar clinic station above Exodeltaris, the voice whispered through an ancient comm panel used only for cardiac syncing. A voice old, yet familiar, as if carved from stories they'd grown up hearing in refugee camps and bioships. Who are you? K asked. I am what remains of Sura'an. And you are what continues. K didn't speak for a while. They didn't know how to respond. What do you say to a legend? So they told her the truth. About the burned clinic on Sci-Fi. About the medics lost. About the Dawnlight Assembly growing faster than they could control. About the Sons of Purity preparing for total war, using propaganda to label them as bioterrorists, claiming they were spreading infectious weakness. Sura'an listened in silence. Her presence, though digital, felt human. She did not give commands. She didn't offer strategy. She offered questions. Do you still believe in healing, even now? K's voice cracked. Yes. Then let us remind the galaxy what Macy can do. And so, together, flesh and memory, they began the final campaign. Not with fleets, not with armies, but with truth. They resurrected the Verne archives, hidden repositories of testimonies from centuries of medics, patients, and peacekeepers. Names, faces, voices of the healed. Uploaded to every relay, hijacking broadcast channels across dozens of systems. A woman who had survived the Hollow because Sura'an whispered to her through psychic flame. A Sephiri boy who once held his dying brother in K's arms and watched him come back. A Sons of Purity defector who'd been saved by a Dawnlight Field medic who didn't even know his name. Billions heard. Millions paused. And some, for the first time, questioned the lie. That strength came only from Fae. The Sons of Purity responded with fire. A wave of destruction swept across fringe systems. Clinics bombed. Healers executed in public square feeds. Dawnlight's allies collapsed under pressure. Until one final message came. Surrender, Kay, or we erase every world that shelters you. Kay looked across their council of medics, alien, human, AI, and didn't speak. They simply stood up and sent back a reply. We surrender nothing. But if you want to meet me, I will come alone. A plan was formed. Sura'an, still fragmented but pulsing with strategy and memory, uploaded a sliver of herself into Kay's field chip. Not as a shield, but as a story. The same story that had stopped the Galaxian War. The same one that soothed the Hollow. Kay stepped onto the enemy dreadnought. No weapons. No army. No shields. Just a healer's robe, and a voice. They were brought before the High Priest of the Sons of Purity, a creature clad in radiant armor, face masked in gold. All around them, soldiers bristled with fear and hatred. The High Priest spoke. You are no warrior. You are a myth. Kay smiled. Then why are you so afraid? And as the High Priest raised his hand to strike, Kay tapped their chest once. And Sura'an spoke. Not from speakers. From every implant. Every memory chip. Every ancient medical beacon that had ever known her name. The ship lit up with her voice. I am Sura'an. And I remember you. I remember the pain you buried. The wounds you hide. The grief you never healed. The soldiers began to cry. Not because of power. Because they remembered who they were, who they used to be. Children once saved, fathers once healed, old allies lost in hatred, and the dreadnought, engine of war, did not fire. It fell silent, because memory had won.